Hello, welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I've got my February reading wrap up for you. So as always, I'm going to start with my stats for the month. And obviously February is a short month, but we actually got 29 days this year with it being a leap year. So actually only really one day shorter than normal. But I did have a very slow start to the month. I was away the first week of February and didn't manage to get any reading done. And so I had to hustle quite a bit to keep up with my normal reading goals, and I always aim to read about 15 books a month, and I only managed to read 14 books, and some of those you'll see are slightly shorter in length or even novellas or short stories, and that's how I kind of made up my numbers. However, even though I only managed to read 14 books, it did come out to 4,365 pages. So when I did the calculation and divided that by 29, it came out to 150 pages per day, which is actually my normal average. So I was very pleased with that. So then in terms of how I read these books, I had one audiobook this month, 2 ARCs and 11 books I read through Kindle Unlimited. In terms of the star ratings, I had 1 2-star read this month, 2 3-star reads, 3 3.5 stars, 6 4 stars, 1 4.5 stars, and 2 5-star reads. In terms of the genres this month, I had 2 alien romances, 2 paranormal romances, 2 sports romances, 3 mafia romances, and 5 dark romances. So as normal, the majority of the books that I read were either dark romances or mafia romances. Okay, so the first book I finished in February was Mercy by Debra and Anastasia, and this was a book that I had been on my TBR for a while. So I took the opportunity to pick this one up and put it on my TBR for February when I used one of my prompt cards, and the prompt was to pick a book with a person's name in the title. Now this one is a dark stalker romance. We are dealing with a heavily tattooed hero who is an assassin, and it's book 1 in the Mercy series. So I'm just going to be upfront and say I didn't enjoy this one as much as I was hoping to, because I really like a stalker romance, I really like dark romances. This hero sounded right up my street and I was really looking forward to reading it. Now it was a good book, I did enjoy this one, I rated it 4 stars. It just wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be, and I'll explain why. So we're following Becca and Nix in this one, who is otherwise known as Mercy. And essentially, Mercy had a very difficult upbringing. He had a very violent father, and he witnessed his father unaliving his mother, essentially, just when he was a little boy. And his father was very violent towards him as well. And it just so happens that on the day that his mother is unalived, his father takes Mercy to the grocery store to buy some groceries and asks him to hold some eggs, but he's obviously still very traumatized by what he's witnessed, and he's shaken quite badly, and his father threatens him that he will punish him severely if he drops the eggs. Now Becca, our heroine, she is also a young girl. She's a very similar age to Mercy, and she witnesses this exchange in the supermarket, and she is a very sort of confident young girl, and she stands up for Mercy in the supermarket and says to his dad, hey, don't be a bully, you shouldn't treat people like that or speak to them like that, basically desist what you are doing. And Mercy is completely taken aback by this, because no one's ever defended him before, and he is totally thrown by the courage and the strength of this little girl to stand up to his father. Of course, his father's not too happy about this, and then they kind of go home in a rage, and Mercy becomes very concerned that his father might take revenge on this little girl. And so basically what follows after that is, obviously then, as they're sort of more grown, we learn that Mercy has escaped his father, and now he has trained to become an assassin, and he has completely covered his identity with a series of tattoos. So he's completely covered head to toe in skeleton tattoos, even his face. So he is a very scary person, and he has now got this name on the street. His street name really is Mercy. But what he does, although he's an assassin, what he actually does is rescues children that have been kidnapped by bad people, and that's his kind of primary motivation for the line of work that he does. But since Becca has been growing up, he's also still afraid that his father will come back at some point and take retribution on Becca, and therefore really since he's been able, old enough to do this, he's been stalking Becca with the justification in his own mind that he's trying to keep her safe and to make sure that his father doesn't hurt her. But obviously because he's now following her and watching her, he develops very strong feelings for Becca, and she becomes the person that he wants to be with. Now he finally gets an opportunity to meet Becca one night when she is working in a bar, and there is a themed night where basically it's kind of a theme of like Night of the Dead or something like that, which basically means people can turn up in Halloween style costumes, and Mercy decides actually if he turns up as himself covered in tattoos, she'll think it's a costume and he'll have the opportunity to speak to her, and they do speak that night and their relationship kind of goes from there. Now obviously there is the usual, you know, what you'd expect in here, that they get quite close. Becca starts to like Mercy, she finds out a bit more about him, and then obviously she's going to find out that he's been stalking her and you know the ramifications of that. But like I said right at the start of this book, it didn't quite hit the spot for me, which was very disappointing. It was still a great book, I would still absolutely recommend it, but I was expecting more from this book, and I think mainly because Mercy wasn't quite as merciless as I was expecting him to be. Although he has a very intimidating appearance, although he is you know, well known on the street as a bad person who does bad things to people, ultimately he rescues children from people who've kidnapped them, and he has an extremely soft spot for Becca, and underneath this intimidating exterior lies a person who just wants to be loved, and he's got an extremely soft spot in the middle, and he was a very, very gentle hero, particularly towards our heroine, and I was just hoping for something a little bit grittier, something a little bit, you know, more violent and gritty, I guess, than what we actually got, but still a very good stalker romance, and like I say, I would recommend. Then the next book that I finished was The Nephilim's Fellowship by Eliza Hampstead, and I've classed this one as a book that I read as an ARC, and it kind of wasn't strictly an ARC copy, but Eliza Hampstead is an author that I beta read for, and this was kind of the second reading before the final manuscript was completed and turned into a book, so there was nothing left for me to really feed back on or comment on. It was just more rereading the book after she'd made the changes from all of her, you know, from the feedback that she's had from her other beta readers and her editor. So I'm also very privileged to have a copy of this book here because Eliza Hampstead sent it to me as a gift. I received it this week as a thank you for being her beta reader on this book, so I'm absolutely delighted to have a physical copy of this one because it's actually book 4 in the War of the Nephilim series. I've got all the other 3 books, so this is the 4th and final book in this series, so it absolutely completes my collection. So like I say, very happy to have this one. This is a paranormal romance, and basically this is not strictly a romance because this is the culmination of a sort of backstory that's been going on in the other 3 books. So the other 3 books in the series were all romances following different couples, but by the time we get to book 4, they now need to basically venture into hell in order to save the world. And so basically in this book we follow all of the couples that we've come to know and love from the previous books, and so we get different perspectives in each of the chapters as they travel from Earth into hell, through the different levels of hell, until they ultimately can catch up with the demons that they need to speak to in order to save the world. So I really enjoyed this series as a whole, rated this one 4 stars, and I would highly recommend you checking this author out. Then the next one that I picked up was Barbarian Mine by Ruby Dixon. This was another book on my TBR for February, and it was one that I picked up from another prompt card that I had, which was to read a book with a purple front cover, and so this one fit the bill nicely, and it had been on my TBR. Very slowly and surely making my way through this series, and this one is book 4 in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. This is on the shorter side, it's about 192 pages, so novella length, so was a nice one, a quick and easy one for me to read. I rated this one 3.5 stars, and I read it on Kindle Unlimited. Essentially, this is an alien romance, and if you know anything about the Ruby Dixon series, Ice Planet Barbarians, essentially there is a you know, a planet where we have these sort of blue aliens that live on this planet, and a group of human women who were kind of abducted from Earth by these really sort of bad aliens, but there is a problem with the ship that they're on, and the ship crash lands onto this planet that the human women call Not Hoth, and they are discovered by the alien men living on this planet, and then they kind of start to, you know, pair up, as it were, because on this planet they have fated mates. So as soon as they recognise who their fated mate is, then they kind of couple up from there. So really this book does exactly what it says on the tin. It's an alien romance, it's forced proximity, fated mates, and there's also a bit of a language barrier in this one, because our hero Rook doesn't live with the rest of the tribe. He was taken away from the tribe when he was very young by his father, because his father believed that the tribe was evil, and he was raised sort of in isolation. And then before he could fully grow up and figure out what was going on, his father passed away, and he was pretty much left in the wilderness by himself to fend for himself, and he's been always scared to go back to the settlement, if you like, because he deems the other aliens as bad people. And then one day when he's out hunting, he spots Harlow, and Harlow is one of our human women, and she is actually trying to help a couple of the other aliens from the good camp, if you like, from their group that we've been reading from before. And Rook sees her and just gets this impulse to hit her over the head, caveman style, and drag her back to his cave. And when she wakes up, he realises that she is in fact his fated mate, and then because there's a language barrier, she tries to explain that she needs to go back, but he's very concerned. He doesn't want her to go back. He thinks she's with the baddies and that he saved her, and eventually convinces her to go with him to where he comes from in this very isolated cave, and eventually they make their way to the beach. And then we have a bit of a time jump, because actually they live very happily together for about a year, but Harlow discovers that she is pregnant, and she starts to get very sick, and Rook is forced to go and get her help and take her back to the settlement that he's always feared, and therefore Harlow is kind of reunited with her human friends, and you know, they have to overcome some issues with them trying to reintegrate back into this settlement, into this tribe basically on this planet. But Ruby Dixon's always a good read. Like I said, this was fun, fast, exactly what you expect to get from this type of book, and so I rated it 3.5 stars. And the next one was another arc, and it was Thorns of Malice by Maggie. This is book 2 in the Wilted Kingdom duets. So if any of you have watched my January reading wrap up, you'll know that I also had an art copy of book 1 in this duet, which was Seeds of Malice, and I really did not enjoy that book at all. But I persevered with book 2 because I had committed to reading the arc, but also I did want to see if Maggie could turn this one around, and that I would have a more favourable opinion of book 1 after I'd read book 2. And unfortunately that didn't happen. So in this sort of duet we're following Dax and Ivy. It's a dark bully romance. Dax is from a very wealthy family. They're actually flower growers and are billionaires, and his friends are also very rich, very entitled people. They get bored very easily, and so what they've kind of been doing is tormenting other people at the school, and working a bit like a pack, if you like, to make people's lives a misery. And they always each year try and pick on a couple of people that they're going to really sort of like, you know, play with, manipulate, ruin essentially, just because they think it's fun. And they've kind of got this secret leaderboard between them to see who the winner is, who can be the most devious, the most dastardly. And this is where Ivy turns up, because she comes to live on Dax's estate because her father is kind of a botanist who specialises in hybrid flowers. So Dax's family hire Ivy's father to come and work for them, and as such they end up living in kind of a worker's cottage on their property, and that puts Dax and Ivy in close proximity to each other, and Dax decides that he's going to mess with Ivy in his final year of school. And his big master plan is to make her fall in love with him, get her to do all of these sexual acts while videoing her, and then release the video to embarrass her in front of everyone. And that is pretty much what happened. Dax is not a likeable character at all, and Ivy was very, very frustrating to read as well. Very, very gullible, way more gullible than she should have been, and Dax was not at all sophisticated in his humiliation, manipulation attempts, in my opinion. But like I say, I was really hoping that book 2 in this duet would pull it back from the brink, because what happens in this one then is that at the end of the school year, Ivy leaves. There is now a 10-year time jump where Ivy has gone to college, she's done some other stuff, and her father unfortunately has passed away, and now she is coming back to seek revenge on Dax and his friendship group for what they did to her in school. But again, what actually happens is Ivy comes back with all of these good intentions, like she's really gonna like get her revenge and, you know, kind of take back control from this group. But essentially what happens is as soon as she sees Dax again, she realises that she's in love with him and can't really follow through. And then what Dax does is decides that yes, Ivy was really badly mistreated, that he does like her after all, and he decides that he's going to basically help her get revenge on his friends, because they are obviously the bad ones that shouldn't have done what they did. And so I was very frustrated again that Ivy relented so quickly, forgave Dax really quickly, but also that Dax still didn't admit liability, didn't admit he was responsible, and didn't accept accountability for what had happened. And then it became basically Dax's revenge plot so that Ivy doesn't have to do it, essentially. So unfortunately, I rated this one personally 2 stars. Because it was an arc, I did round it up to 3 stars on Goodread, but if I'm being very honest, book 1 should have been a 1 star, book 2 was a 2 star, and I really wouldn't recommend this duet at all. Okay, so then the next one was an absolute breath of fresh air. I absolutely love this one, rated it 5 star, and it was The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer. Now this is book 2 in the Vancouver Storm series. I haven't read book 1, but I picked this one out of my TBR jar, and it was recommended by Cheyenne from That Tall Book Girl, and it was one of her top 10 reads of 2023. Now this was right up my street because it's a sports romance and it's fake dating. I absolutely love the fake dating trope, so I was really excited to get stuck into this one. It's ice hockey. We're following Rory, who is our ice hockey star playing for a team in Vancouver, and then we have Hazel, who is like a physiotherapist that works for the team. And essentially Rory and Hazel knew each other in high school, and Rory's always had the hots for Hazel. He's always really liked her, and she was sort of his tutor for a while in high school. Hazel though had a boyfriend called Connor, who she was absolutely madly in love with him, followed him to college, but Connor was not a good boyfriend at all. He cheated on her, he was very mean to her, and they ended up breaking up, and Hazel was left heartbroken. So Hazel comes with a lot of baggage because she doesn't trust men at all. She finds it really, really hard to build relationships with them and get to know people, and as such she kind of has a series of one-night stands but never commits to like a proper date or going on second dates and things like that, because she just doesn't want to get close to another person again. So after Hazel graduates college, she finds her way on to the physiotherapy roster on this ice hockey team, and Rory, who she knew from high school, basically is one of the star players on this team. And then Connor, who is also an ice hockey player, is drafted onto this team, and not only that, he is assigned to Hazel as his physiotherapist. Now she is not at all looking forward to this, and so Rory offers her a deal and basically says, you know, I know this is going to be really tough for you. Connor's coming back. I know it's going to bring up bad feelings. He's going to make things difficult for you. It's going to be a little bit awkward. And because Rory really wants to protect her and make sure that she's okay, he offers to pretend to be her boyfriend so that Connor leaves her alone. And so that's what happens. Now, obviously, because she is pretending to be his girlfriend, she ends up wearing his sort of, you know, his jersey. She goes to the ice hockey games, she spends a bit of time with him in public, but also they start to spend more time together privately as well and start texting each other. and their relationship, which was purely friendship to start off with, blossoms into something much more. And so I would also characterise this as a slow burn romance as well, because it's not super slow, but they really develop their friendship, then they start flirting with each other and developing feelings, and there's lots of really cute moments throughout this book when they take some time to, you know, be together. And what I absolutely loved about this one as well is the fact that there was no third act breakup. There absolutely didn't need to be one, and it was just more about Hazel working through her feelings and coming to terms with the fact that she really did trust Rory and was prepared to take a relationship forward with him. But it was such a good book. The chemistry between this couple was amazing, and I really liked kind of that, you know, that banter, that friendship that they had, all the flirting that they did. It was really fun to read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So then I decided to go for something a little bit darker, and I decided to read Accidental Witness by Sam Mariano, and this is book 1 in the Morelli family series, which is basically a mafia romance, Italian mafia romance. There is a series of books really following this same family, but particularly focused on Matteo, who is the head of the Morelli family. Now this one was a romance between Vince and Mia, but Matteo was definitely trying to muscle in on their relationship, and I haven't read too far ahead, so I don't really know what happens, but I know that everyone loves Matteo Morelli. He is a very evil mafia boss, very manipulative and cruel person, but anybody who loves Sam Mariano's books always talks about Matteo and also compares quite a lot of her other heroes to him. So I was really intrigued to read this one, and I will definitely continue with the series. But for this particular book, I rated it 4 stars. I read it on Kindle Unlimited, and like I said, we're following Vince and Mia. Now this really gave me the Initiation vibes. And so I don't know actually if this was Nikki Sloane's inspiration for what she ended up writing in The Initiation, but that's the sort of the kind of vibe that I got. Vince is part of the Morelli family. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he is Matteo's cousin, something like that, or nephew or something like that. And Vince and Mia go to school together essentially. And this one starts where one night Mia basically goes outside of her house to make a phone call because she wants to ring a boy that her mother wouldn't approve of, and she doesn't want her mum overhearing. But basically when she goes outside, she notices that something's going on in the house next door, and the house then sets on fire, and 2 men leave the house, locking the door and trapping the neighbours in the house, and she is stunned to sort of witness this crime. And then she attempts to take a video of it on her phone, but she is spotted by Vince basically, and she drops her phone. And she recognises who Vince is, has heard about the Morelli family, and so she is very scared indeed. But Vince makes eye contact with her while she's hiding, but doesn't say anything to her, and she kind of runs back into the house. And it's the next day at school that Vince basically kind of confronts her, and Mia promises that she won't say anything or do anything, but Vince needs to be sure, so he kind of then encounters her a few more times to see if he can scare her into keeping his mouth shut. The thing is, Vince is now very intrigued by Mia, and Mia is very attracted to Vince, and they kind of start this romance. But Vince needs to keep her at arm's length because he can't have Matteo finding out that he's got a girlfriend. Things wouldn't be good, and it would very much put her in danger. That said, he's not too subtle about the situation, and Mia really likes him, so she pushes to meet more family members, and then basically she meets his auntie, and yeah, basically Matteo, it doesn't take too long for Matteo to figure out that Vince has this girlfriend Mia. And then Matteo also figures out that she was the witness to this crime and decides that he should probably kill her. Vince begs him not to, and then they do this very strange deal because Matteo actually decides, I think, that he likes Mia, or at least wants to play with her a bit. So they do this weird deal where Mia has to come and live in his house so that he can keep an eye on her. She's allowed to continue to see Vince, and they basically tell Mia's mother that she's going to be a live-in nanny for Matteo's child, because he actually happens to be a single parent. Of course, this is all a ruse. She isn't there to be a nanny, but that's the excuse he uses for her mum. And so Mia is pretty much forced into moving in to the Morelli household. And this is where Matteo tries to really get between her and Vince. Vince gets very, very jealous and sort of possessive. It ruins things a little bit between Mia. And of course, Matteo, being a San Mariano hero, doesn't take no for an answer. And there's scenes in here where there is definitely dub-con, non-con going on, and strong manipulation from Matteo to get what he wants. Now this book does end with a happy for now for Vince and Mia, but we can assume that it's only a matter of time before Matteo advances on his plan to get Mia for himself, because that's where it seems that this one is going. So I really enjoyed this one. Like I say, I gave it 4 stars and we'll definitely be carrying on with the series. So the next one I read was Ruthless Empire by Rina Kent, and this is book 6 in the Royal Elite series. Now again, I haven't read books 1 through to 5, but this one was a recommendation that I pulled out from my TBR jar, and it was recommended by I Love K-Pop 39. So if you're watching, thank you very much for the recommendation. I really enjoyed this one. I rated it 4 stars and I read it by Kindle Unlimited. Now, as with all Rina Kent's, this one is dark romance. I'd say it's also enemies to lovers, mafia adjacent. It's not full on mafia, but mafia adjacent. It's new adult. It's a bully romance, and the couple in this one, Cole and Silver, ended up becoming step siblings when their parents get married. So it's not a direct step sibling romance, but they do later in the book become step siblings. So I have not read, like I said, this series before, but I have read Rina Kent's Legacy of the Gods series, which is a Next Generation series, and the parents from the kids in that one are some of the characters from this Royal Elite series. And so as a result, I felt like I could dive into book 6 without reading some of the others, and I understood who the characters were because I'd met them in the Legacy of the Gods series. So in terms of the friendship group that Cole has and the other couples that we know about from Legacy of the Gods, they were kind of all featured in this one as well because they're part of the same friendship group. I also kind of figured that, a bit like Legacy of the Gods, all of these books overlap from a timeline perspective. So again, I'm sure there are like Easter eggs in the other books, and you learn more about the characters as you build up to this particular story. The timelines definitely overlap because some of the other characters in here that clearly got their HEA and would go on to have kids that would appear in the Legacy of the Gods. At parts through this book, some of those couples weren't together yet, but you could see that's where it was heading. Now the hero in this one, Cole, he had a fairly disturbed upbringing. His dad was not particularly a nice guy. He was quite violent. And then one day when he was fairly young, he finds his dad dead in their swimming pool basically, and there's a lot of blood there. And instead of kind of calling for help, he kind of runs away to the park. This is when he's a little boy, and basically when he gets to the park, the heroine in this one, Silver, also happens to be in the park, and Cole and Silver start to talk to each other, and they kind of make this promise that they're going to be each other's firsts. And then this starts their sort of relationship as they get older and go through school, and it kind of starts this sort of bully romance in a way, because Cole, although he's very, very drawn to Silver and he wants to be with her, he doesn't really know how to express his emotions. Sometimes Silver will do things that he'll think is a slight towards him, and he'll retaliate and act out. And so over the years they've kind of developed this sort of bully sort of style of relationship, where Cole is not very nice to Silver, and Silver is not particularly nice to Cole either. But they're in the same friendship group and they go to the same school, and so over the years they kind of get to know each other. And this one sort of really then comes to a head because Cole's mother, she is an author, and she basically meets Silver's dad, who is a politician, and they start dating and eventually move in together and want to get married. So basically it puts Cole and Silver very much in close proximity to one another. They're now having to live in the same house. and Carl very much sees this as an opportunity to ramp up his bullying behaviour and you know, enjoy the fact that they are together under the same roof. And there's this whole thing around, you know, their promise to each other about they'll be each other's first, and she has absolutely kept to her promise that he will be her first at pretty much everything, except he doesn't realise this because to get back at him for something that he's done, she kind of lies and pretends that she's no longer a virgin, and he gets very, very angry about this, and then forces her to have sex with him, and then discovered that she was a virgin after all, and you know, there's a little bit of guilt there for the way that all goes down. But this couple cannot stay away from each other. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, but very much enemies to lovers sort of thing, where they get to know each other more. They're now in close proximity together, and Silver starts to learn more about Cole, why he is the way he is, why he was her bully for such a long time, why he's behaved the way he has, and Cole in turn learns more about Silver. There's quite a lot of stuff going in the back story of this one, things to do with their parents, things they've experienced, and also there is this unknown character who appears to be a stalker and has very much got their sights set on Silver, and it adds quite a really good level of intrigue to this book, because we're not really sure if it's Cole himself or if it's someone else, or who this person is. And I really, really liked how this was sort of unveiled and we find out who this person is, but it definitely kept me guessing throughout. Really enjoyed it, and Cole was a very interesting, extremely layered sort of character, which you can expect from Rina Kent. So after that, I'd read a couple of dark romances, and I continued on with another sports romance that I'd actually been listening to the audiobook for, which was The Deal by Elle Kennedy, and this is book 1 in the Off Campus series. I'd not read anything from Elle Kennedy before, but I'd heard so many good things about her, and in fact at the moment The Graham Effect, I know, is really popular. A lot of people have read that as she started a new series, and in fact that is a next generation for this series, and so I was very intrigued to meet the main character in this one, who is Garrett Graham, and the father of the hero from the latest book, The Graham Effect, and I just absolutely love Garrett to death, so fully understand that if his son is anything like him, then that book will be very swoony as well. So like I said, I listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated brilliantly by Christian Fox and Lorelei Avalon, and I rated this one 5 stars. So like I said, we're following Hannah and we're following Garrett Graham, who is a ice hockey star at college. So this is very much a sports romance. It's also fake dating, so another fake dating ice hockey romance that I read last month and absolutely loved. It's friends to lovers, and there's a bit of sex education going on in this one as well. Now what I loved about this one is that Garrett was such a fantastic hero. He was so sweet, he was so swoony, and he was so kind, but also very sexy to Hannah. And Hannah has experienced something very upsetting and disturbing in the past, and she is trying to kind of come to terms with what happened to her and work it through, and Garrett is the perfect person to help her with this. What I liked about it, even though it was very difficult subject matter, Elle Kennedy dealt with it brilliantly, and we didn't dwell on it too long, and it was more about how Hannah had been very much a victim, but she wasn't a victim, she was an absolute survivor, and really took control of her own life back, which I thought was fantastic. So this incident that I'm talking about is basically that she was sexually assaulted as a teenager. Somebody that she thought she could trust actually drugged her and then took advantage of her, and so she has been very traumatized by this incident, particularly because as soon as she got home, her parents took her to the hospital. She had a rape test and everything, and they were going to prosecute the person who did it, but unfortunately the person who did it was someone in a position of power. They were the son of like the mayor of this town, and basically her parents ended up losing a lot of money through legal fees, and it ended up where this case was thrown out of court. The person who did it was never ever properly punished, for what he did, and she ended up being a pariah of this town. And she's gone through a lot of therapy, and she's also had boyfriends, and she's slept with people, but she is unable to reach orgasm when she is with another person, and so she is worried that she's sort of damaged in some way. Also, for the very first time, she's got the hots for this new guy at school who happens to be a football player, and she really likes him, but hasn't plucked up the courage to say anything to him. She's a little bit worried that if, you know, they end up having a sexual relationship, things will go a bit funny. He won't understand, and you know, she hasn't really got up the courage to speak to him. And this is where Garrett Graham comes in, because Hannah is doing very well in a particular class that Garrett is not doing very well at all, and he needs a good grade in this class in order to keep up his grade point average so he can continue to play ice hockey. So he approaches Hannah and says, hey, would you be my tutor for this class so I can improve my grades, so I can stay and play ice hockey, and in exchange we can fake date, because I will raise your street cred, because everyone loves me in college. I said that he was totally swoony and such a great guy, but he's also very big-headed. He's absolutely brilliant at ice hockey. He knows he is, and all the girls absolutely love him. So he's like, go out with me, I will raise your street cred, and then the guy on the football team will see you, spot you, want to go out with you. So this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Of course, when they start to fake date, they start to go out, they spend time together, because she is actually tutoring him to do well in this class. And she starts to realise that he's more than just a jock. He's more than just, you know, this big-headed guy who thinks he's absolutely amazing. And he is so sweet to her, so nice to her. He absolutely loves Hannah as well. Hannah is absolutely fantastic. And as they start to share more about their lives, because Garrett's life isn't that fantastic either. His father was a very famous hockey player, but he was also a bit of an asshole, didn't treat his mum or him very well, and he has, you know, been very hard taskmaster when it comes to ice hockey. So Garrett tries to avoid him at all costs, to be honest, but he doesn't really share with other people, because everyone thinks his dad is amazing, this amazing ice hockey legend and star. But over time, Hannah starts to share her past with Garrett. Garrett shares his past with her, and they form this really close bond. And because she shares what's happened to her from a sexual perspective, they also start to have these sex education classes where Garrett is going to help her having a good time in the bedroom. So yeah, I absolutely love this one. Thought it was brilliantly written, some great characters in here, and even though, like I say, it dealt with some very difficult subject matter, I don't think Elle Kennedy dwelt on it too long, and the focus was very much on Hannah regaining her power and control back over her own body, which I absolutely loved. Then I went on to read Claimed by the Demon Lord by Iris Amador, and this is book 1 in the A Match Made in Hell series. It's a paranormal romance that features a demon and a banshee, and basically it's a hot guy, the hot demon, and a bit of a nerdy girl who is the banshee, and so it's kind of like that sort of standard trope. And we're following Sylvia and Adrian. Now Adrian is of course our demon. He's actually a demon lord. He is next in line to be in charge of one of the circles of hell, and his dad is still very much alive, but he needs to start preparing to take up his position, because his dad could be assassinated at any time. You cannot trust demons in hell, and so people are always trying to overthrow the demon kings, and so Adrian is very much preparing for when he needs to take over from his father. Now to do this he needs basically a left hand, I think it's a left hand, right hand or left hand. He needs somebody who is going to be his bodyguard, and normally you would pick someone, you know, very strong with a lot of powers, but Adrian picks Sylvia to be his, you know, his bodyguard essentially. And everyone is completely shocked, outraged, stunned that he would pick her, because she is a very quiet, meek, like I say, sort of nerdy sort of girl. No one is that interested in her at school, and she's only recently come into her banshee powers and she's not fully trained yet, so they're like, she's got nothing to offer, why are you even bothering with this girl? But the thing is, Adrian has got a secret crush on her, but she has repeatedly turned him down, and he thought this was a fantastic way to force her to be in close proximity with him, and he feels sure that the more time they spend together, the more she will come around and want to be with him. Of course, she is horrified to be picked as his bodyguard, but she has no choice, because once he's decided that is it, he's a demon after all, she has no choice, and she really doesn't want to go with him, but he takes her down to hell to see the realm and everything, and sort of be sworn in like a blood swearing in of this new position that she has got for herself. Overall, I rated this book 3 stars, and I read it on Kindle Unlimited, and one of the main reasons I read it is because the author actually reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in reading her book. It was a new release that came out on the 23rd of December. Now, it doesn't look like this author has written many books in the past. There's just 2 other books on Amazon, and they're all fairly short, sort of novella length. This one was also a fairly short book, around the 230 page mark. And I was really interested by the premise of this book. I love a paranormal romance, and I love anything to do with, you know, demons and angels and that sort of thing. So I was looking forward to reading this one, and I really enjoyed the premise of this one. I thought it was an interesting idea. And also I really liked the view that we got of like this sort of like the way hell was kind of set up with all these different levels in hell, and each level was kind of like you know, controlled by a different demon person, different demon type. But yeah, all of the kind of paranormal kids, if you like, went to a normal school, kind of, I imagine, on Earth, because then they kind of go into some portal or other to get down to hell. And so I kind of really like this concept overall, and because she's just sort of come into her banshee powers, Sylvia was very much practicing what that was, and basically her powers very specifically are she can see when someone is going to die, and then she has this death scream basically, so when someone is about to die she will do this scream. But it also is quite powerful in that if someone was going to attack her, she saw her own death, she could scream, it would incapacitate the person. So actually I felt that Adrian was not too stupid picking Sylvia to be his kind of bodyguard, because she had potential to have amazing power, because she would be able to sense if he was going to die and therefore prevent his death and be the best bodyguard ever. And she had this kind of like very powerful you know, shield, if you like, because of this scream. So I really liked the concept of this world, how the world was starting to be built. One of the reasons I didn't rate it any more than 3 stars was because I felt like the book was just a little bit too short. I felt some of the characterisation was a little bit rushed. I felt there was much more potential between this couple. Like I completely understood where they came from, but I didn't really feel the connection with each other. Sylvia started off as very meek and mild, and by the end she'd really turned and come into her own powers, but I don't think there was enough time for her to transition from this meek person into this person with quite a lot of power. It kind of happened really on a bit of a, you know, on a bit of a dime. It happened very quickly, and so I never really understood really what Adrian really saw in her, why he was so obsessed with her before she was brought into his world. And I just didn't think they had enough time as a couple to really kind of like deepen their connection with each other. But like I said, this author has only written a few books so far. I really enjoyed the concept of this book, and will be intrigued to read the next one in the series just to see where she takes it and how her writing develops over time. Then after that I picked up Bloodbound to the Space Vampire by Daisyodonnell. This is just a short read, just 72 pages, so a very quick read, and it's actually part of the Earth's Bounty kind of universe, but Daisyodonnell had written this as a short story that she wrote for the Super Vellum anthology. Now I rated this one 3 stars, mainly because it was such a short book and we didn't really get a lot of development from the character. It was very insta-lovey because these two were fated mates, but it was a fun read. The characters that we're following in this one are Beth and Jarrow. Now Jarrow is kind of our space vampire. Essentially he is a race of beings who do drink people's blood in order in order to sustain their life. But they're not vampires as we traditionally know them, but they are aliens, and historically their race has been sent to Earth to kind of protect the inhabitants of Earth. And so he is living quite happily on Earth. And then they have a lovely time at Halloween when they throw these parties and they can be themselves and they can drink people's blood and stuff like that. And usually it's with willing participants. Beth is one such person who her friends hear about this amazing party that's going down. She kind of gets dragged along to this party, and as soon as Jarrow sees her at this party, he instantly recognises that she's his fated mate, grabs at the chance to make her his, and then basically makes her his. And that is basically as much as the story is. Like I say, it's very, very short, but it was a fun alien romance to read. Then I read Aldo by Melanie Morland, and this is a mafia romance. It's book 1 in the Men of the Fall series. I actually think there's only going to be 2 books in this one. The second book is, if it's not out now, it's out very soon, called Roman. And Roman was a book that Melanie Morland really had in her mind of what she wanted to write. But there's some side characters in Roman's story that some of her sort of beta readers, her fans, said actually this other guy Aldo should have his own book, and she decided to write it first. So it's a bit of a prequel, if you like, to Roman. So another shortish book which really sets up Roman's story, but nevertheless this still absolutely stood on its own, and I really loved the relationship between this couple. Aldo, of course, and Violet is his heroine. Now this is a Canadian mafia story. They're sort of in the Niagara Falls area. Roman is the boss of the, you know, the head of the mafia essentially, and Aldo is his long-serving best friend slash bodyguard slash head of security. They've known each other forever, and so Aldo is very much part of this mafia group and the right-hand man of Roman. Now Violet basically is a young woman who comes to town looking for a job, and she ends up working at Roman's casino. Aldo is the one that actually recruits her, employs her, and he's very intrigued from their first meeting, kind of keeps an eye on her from there. They're very, very attracted to each other. They end up sending each other text messages and little presents and things, but they, you know, they don't really want to be together. She isn't interested in anything long term. He, you know, doesn't believe he's got feelings that he could ever fall in love with a woman anyway. But their attraction grows so strong that they decide they're going to get it out of their system and have one night together. Of course, one night is not going to be enough. One night becomes 2 and 3 and so on, and their relationship kind of goes from there. There is a bit of suspense running through this one because Violet is in danger, which also leads to a bit of caretaking, where when she gets injured, Aldo has to take care of her. So there's a caretaking element to this one as well. Overall, I enjoyed the read. It was a nice, easy read. It's actually quite a light, gentle kind of mafia romance, so probably a good one to dip your toe into the water. If you've not read mafia romances before, it might be a good one for you, and I rated this one 4 stars. Then I read Undertow by Sam Mariano, which is book 2 in the Coastal Elite series. I really wanted to carry on with this series because I'm very intrigued about what's going to happen, and she's just brought out the 4th book in this series, Surrender, and then I know she's working on a 5th book, so I thought I would make a bit of headway in this series. So this one is another shorter length sort of book, and we're following Hayden and Gemma. It's another dark romance. They're both single parents, so they're slightly older. So this couple are slightly older. They're both single parents of teenage children. In fact, their kids go to school with each other, and Hayden is an extremely successful lawyer and extremely wealthy, and Gemma is a dance instructor. Like I say, Gemma is a single mum. Her teenage daughter is Parker, and they live in this very, very nice neighbourhood, but they've got some really, really horrible neighbours, and the neighbours are trying to get them out of the street. So they're sort of bullying Gemma a little bit, and it gets to the point where Gemma has absolutely had enough, and she decides to seek legal help, and that's where she basically goes to Hayden's office to ask if he can help her with her neighbour issue. Now Hayden, like I say, is extremely successful lawyer, charges an awful lot of money, and basically says, hey, you can't afford my services, however I will not bill you for this consultation, which would have been about $1,500, if you come out on a date with me. And Gemma is absolutely, no way, I'm not going on a date with you. I don't date. My focus is absolutely my daughter. Also, she knows that Hayden's son, Landon, goes to school with Parker, and in fact they don't get on. Landon has been a long-standing bully to her daughter, and so she has absolutely no intentions whatsoever of dating Hayden. She's like, there's no way I'm gonna date the father of the boy that has terrorised my daughter throughout her high school education. But Hayden is a Sam Mariano hero, and he is not going to take no for an answer, and he absolutely wears Gemma down until he gets to go on a date with her. Then all they need to do is convince their kids that it's okay for them to move in together. I enjoyed this one. It was great as a setup for the following book in the series, and I rated it 4 stars. So I absolutely did go on to read the next book in the series, Contempt by Sam Mariano. This is book 3 in the Coastal Elite series, and of course in this one we're following Landon and Parker, who are the kids of the couple from the previous book. I enjoyed this one much more. This one, you know, really sort of progressed the story and where Sam Mariano wants to go with the series as a whole, and I rated it 4.5 stars. Now, once more, this is a dark romance. It's a high school bully romance. It's forced proximity, and ultimately these two become step siblings, but it's not a step sibling romance, so it's not taboo in that sense. Landon, as I've said, has been bullying Parker since high school. He has been a complete and utter dick essentially, and making Parker's life an absolute misery. But he started to escalate, so as she's got older he started to escalate and come on to her quite strongly, and kind of a bit of sexually assaulting slash dubious consent, non-consent going on with Landon and Parker. And Parker has become scared to be with him by herself, and even when she tries to stay away from him, Landon will not leave her alone. And so one of the first things we see that Landon does to Parker is that while Hayden and Gemma are out on a date, Landon decides he's going to go over to Parker's house, force his way into the house, chase her up the stairs. She locks herself into the room, but he's banging on the door, and she's desperately trying to get a hold of her mum, but she can't get through to her because she's on this date with Hayden. She has to call the police, and Landon is arrested. Now, of course, they get to the police station. Hayden is there to get his son out of trouble, and he has to take Parker to one side and says, look, I know what he's done is really bad, but there's absolutely no way my son is going to prison for this one, or even get any charges placed upon him, so you better basically let this one go. And this is kind of like what we've seen already, and kind of really sets us up for this kind of book in terms of like where it goes from there. And of course now they're in a situation where their parents are very much in love with each other, and they've moved in together, and now Parker is stuck in the house with Landon, but she is desperate for her mother to be happy. And she doesn't want her to split up with Hayden just because she doesn't get on with Landon. So Parker does absolutely everything she can to get Landon over, get Landon on side, and get him to stop being so much of a dick, basically. But if he does anything to her, she absolutely is not going to tell her mum about it. Now, Landon knows this, so he absolutely plays and pushes this as far as he can take it, because he knows how much Parker cares for her mum and how much she is desperate for the relationship between Hayden and Gemma to work out. Landon doesn't care at all, but he, like I say, he uses this really as leverage against Parker to continue to bully her, to continue to do horrible things to her, and really push as many buttons as he absolutely can. Now, this is quite a long book, and if this was just about Landon and Parker, it would have been much shorter, but there's quite a big portion of this book that we start to learn more about another character called Hannah. Now, we saw Hannah in book 1, which was Even If It Hurts, and also the character in that one, Dare, although he's gone away now to college and he lives on the other side of the country, Dare still is fairly powerful and is very influential on the characters in this sort of book. And we start to learn a little bit more about Hannah, what went on in Even If It Hurts, and her relationship with Anne, her evil stepsister, and her stepmother, and that whole kind of relation, you know, that whole situation that Hannah is finding herself in, where she's very much a Cinderella sort of character. Now, Parker and Hannah are friends, so this is why Hannah's there, because she's obviously seen what Dare did to her other friend and now is trying to help Parker with Landon, and so, you know, is there for Parker whenever she needs her, but also Hannah kind of needs Parker at times as well. So I have seen reviews for this one where some people thought that Hannah plays too big of a role in this one, and that the focus is very much taken away from Landon and Parker, and I do agree to some extent, but I still absolutely love the relationship between Landon and Parker and their story arcs and how they end up with a HEA, but I think it was absolutely essential that Hannah was part of this story, because we're ultimately working towards Hannah's romance, Hannah's HEA, but we know she's going to have to go through a lot more before we actually get her story, and that is really what Sam Mariano is building us up to. So I didn't mind how much she was in there. I thought it was great from a backstory perspective, and I think by the time we get to the end of this series, we're going to appreciate all of those bits a lot more, and probably people will be going back to read the start and picking out some of the Easter eggs in there, as Sam Mariano has kind of laid the breadcrumbs, as it were, until we make our way to Hannah's story. Anyway, and finally, I don't know how long I've been talking for, but pretty long time, I think, but we're on the last book now, called Sweet Severity by Zoe Blake. This was a new release in the month of February, and it's Ruthless Obsession book 7. So there's 6 books prior to this in this series, and this one follows the kind of Russian mafia, and this is our 7th Russian mafia hero in this kind of like universe that Zoe Blake has brought us. Now, I really love Zoe Blake's heroes. I particularly love her Russian mafia heroes. They are always completely crazy, over the top, do not take no for an answer. If you don't like those kind of heroes, then her books are not for you, but if you do, I would absolutely recommend her, because I absolutely love them and gobble them up. Now, this one was an age gap relationship, close proximity, and also a bit of a nanny situation going on here as well, because we ended up following Mac and Phoebe. Now, Mac is our Russian mafia hero. We'd seen him in a couple of the other books before this, and he kind of is a part owner of this sort of like this club in town, which is kind of like a gentleman's club, but mainly there is gambling and stuff there, but they are very, very wealthy, and he lives in kind of a penthouse kind of above the club. Now, in a previous book, his nephew got himself into a bit of trouble, got his girlfriend pregnant, and then they ended up having to terminate the nephew, and it basically meant that then when his girlfriend delivered his son, she was overwhelmed, didn't want to bring the baby up, and so Mac has basically taken responsibility for the baby and is now bringing the baby up as his. So he is kind of now a bit of a single father, even though technically the baby isn't his biologically, but he is now a single father. Now, this book starts where we meet Phoebe. Phoebe is a young woman who lives with her brother, but he doesn't treat her particularly well. When she was a teenager, her parents passed away. Her brother was much older than her and ended up being her guardian, and he is kind of like a police chief, but he's not particularly nice. He resents Phoebe quite a lot. He doesn't think that he should have had to bring her up, and he's been pretty much treating her like a slave in his house, and is very, very controlling. One day though, she asks if she can take the car out to run some errands, and her brother uncharacteristically lets her, because he doesn't often let her out on her own. She's a bit of she's not exactly a prisoner, but she's not allowed out very often. And this one day she is driving the car, but it's very icy out. She slips on some ice, and she kind of like skids quite a lot down this hill and ends up crashing into Mac's car, and Mac assesses the situation very quickly and decides that Phoebe is the one for him, and he's going to take her. She is young and vulnerable, and, you know, clearly needs help and support, and he works out very, very quickly that her brother is an asshole, and decides that he is going to rescue her and take her back with him, and in fact she'll make the perfect nanny. It's a win-win situation. Of course, Phoebe is absolutely horrified. She doesn't want to do this, you know, she tries to escape, but things go down. Mac is a Zoe Blake hero, so he is not going to let her go. And what I like about this one is that we also see some of the other characters. So as you go through, all the women in this series, they've been through exactly the same experience, right? Because each of their men are just as crazy. So they're a great support unit, because when they get a new woman into the fold, they take her under their wing, they make sure she's okay, and they kind of explain, hey, this guy, your new boyfriend is a Russian boyfriend, and they do things slightly differently, and I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to go along with it. And but if you do, he will absolutely treat you like a queen. You'll have everything you ever want. And of course, it's not too long before Phoebe is won completely over by Max. So I did enjoy this one. It was a quick, fun read again. However, I only rated it 3.5 stars. Normally I'd rate Zoe Blake's books at least 4 stars. But I felt that this was a little bit lackluster. I don't know if it was just a bit samey. I mean, this is the 7th book in this series now. I didn't think there was anything new, and I didn't think that Mac's character was kind of different from any of the others, really. Like, sometimes they do stand out from the others, but this one I think will become, over time, will become a little bit unmemorable, and I'll forget which hero was which. So I still really enjoyed it. I rated it 3.5 stars, so I did round it up to 4 stars on Goodreads, but not the best in the series. So there we go, that's 14 books that I read in February. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Why does the battery always go in the bloody middle? Right, shouldn't talk so long, Helen, that's why. Right. Now this author, it doesn't look like this author has actually read, now it doesn't actually look like this author has read, right, so, this is going to be a long one, isn't it? Always is. In fact, I didn't write down their names. Now, this is right on my street, London. And it was recommended by Cheyenne from that Thorns of Malice, of Malice, of Malice. Ah, yes. I'll just leave it there.